think I was looking for something, for a very long time. And then I kind of found Derby. I probably would become an academic. I'd give in. I never want to do anything just to shock or surprise or disrupt. There needs to be a clear rationale as to why it fits in. Just tell people why they should come in, and if it's come and look at this stuff because it's fun, tell them that. You have to kind of create the environment where leadership isn't some top-down authoritarian thing, but it's a facilitation. People who are in that privileged position to try stuff, fine, but for everyone else, there's day 6 and 7, isn't there?
Welcome to the Leading Boldly podcast. I'm Matt Clutterham.
And I'm Jenny Jarvis.
Today's guest is someone who's shaking up the world of arts, culture and heritage, blending creativity, business and cutting-edge technology to keep history alive and audiences engaged. Alex Rock is not your typical museum or heritage leader. He's a fundraiser, a film director, a digital innovator, and, just for good measure, a published historian. He's worked in cathedrals, cinemas, museums, festivals, leading bold projects that bring new audiences into spaces they might never have stepped into before. Whether it's running outdoor festivals, pioneering immersive AR and VR experiences, or figuring out how to make cultural organizations actually financially sustainable, Alex is at the forefront of reinventing how we experience art and history. But let's be real, leading in this space isn't easy. Cultural institutions aren't exactly known for moving fast, and funding is always a challenge. So, how do you push for change in a world that can sometimes be resistant to it? How do you get new audiences excited about heritage? And what does it take to run a creative organization like a real business while still staying true to its mission? Today, we're going to unpack all of that with you and Alex, and probably hear some wild behind-the-scenes stories along the way. So buckle up, because it's going to be fascinating. Alex, welcome to the Leading Boldly podcast.
Right, thanks for having me. I'm not quite sure how to live up to that intro. That was really something. Thank you very much, Matt.
No problem. We always like to dive right back to start with and totally rewind the clock. What were you like as a child, and was history and art and culture always there for you?
Oh God, that's a good one. What was I like as a child? I think it was a bit of a terror, to be honest. I think it was. I was quite intelligent. I grew up in Dudley. Kind of standard kind of housing estate stuff. Like my dad was a warehouseman, and then a postman. Mom's a shop assistant, and they kind of instilled in me this kind of solid work ethic, and I think because I was quite intelligent, I like to push the boundaries of what can be done within a framework. So I think when I was a kid, I don't know, I'm not sure the teachers fully appreciated that. But then, I hit secondary school, got inspired by this one fantastic teacher who showed me the kind of the wonder of narratives, I suppose. She was my English teacher. Started on books, moved on to films, it's interesting because I'm a historian, but I'm not a trained historian. So the last time I studied history professionally was when I was 14. But I did a BA in film and TV in English at Aberystwyth, and then I didn't want to become an academic. So I finished my BA and thought, well, do you know what? I'm gonna get a real job, like my dad, and I went to work for Severn Trent Water. So like this is my first exploration of big business, right? So I've always had a job since I was 16. I was a waiter in a terrible hotel in Dudley, and then when I was 18, I kind of did front of house at Dudley Zoo. I was a car park attendant, face painter, birthday party host, whole shebang. I did everything on that site. And then when I finished my BA, I thought, do you know what? No, I'm not going to go and do a master's. I'm going to get a proper job. So I started working for Severn Trent Water. And that was my first kind of experience of big business. I didn't like it very much. Didn't get on with it. My attendance record was atrocious. And I was basically, for Severn Trent, I was tasked with finding properties that they'd forgot to put onto the billing system, and then like billing these lovely little old ladies like 6 years backdated water bills, and I was like, do you know what, this is not for me. I didn't find a sense of social value in the work, and that didn't motivate me to frankly get out of bed and get on the bus to Birmingham that usually took about 90 minutes. I had a little portable DVD player. I used to watch films on the bus on the way in. It was great.
You're obviously younger than us.
I think everyone else on the bus thought I was insane. It's like, what's this commuter doing? Like, watching like classic 1950s, like, watching Psycho on the bus at like 7 o'clock in the morning. So I gave it like 11 months. And then I thought, do you know what? No, I'm going to go and do a master's. Did my master's. Didn't want to become an academic, but an opportunity came up to go and do a PhD at De Montfort Uni in Leicester. And like working class lads from Dudley aren't meant to do PhDs. Like, it's not for us. And so like this was paid, like my tuition fees were paid. They were going to pay me 13 grand a year. And, I think I owed it to everyone who'd instilled that value in me to go and do that. So I did that for 3 years. Still don't want to become an academic, and then got bored after 3 years and got myself a part-time job. And I was just like, I want a job in industry, but I want a job with some social value. And then ended up. I'd been to Derby once to watch West Brom lose 1-0 to Derby. So get off the coach, get into Pride Park. We lose 1-0. We always lose 1-0 to Derby. And Robbie Savage is giving it that to all the away fans. But like, so that was my only experience at Derby. It's just like a car park, Pride Park essentially. And then I see this job at Quad for like engagement officer, and it's like 3 days a week. And I'm like, oh, I can finish the final 6 months of my PhD and do this job. It took me another 2 years to finish it. But like, I think I was looking for something, for a very long time. And then I kind of found Derby, and like that kind of settled me down a bit, I think.
How long have you been in Derby?
I came to Derby in 2012. I was the engagement officer at Quad for 2 years. And then I was also the audience development coordinator for Fest Day as well. So I've done the rounds of cultural organisations in the city. Like there's only 2 left, but I'm kind of settled here. I don't really want to. I don't want to go anywhere else.
We talked a bit when we met about working in the cathedral in Derby. It's a great building. I think it's probably not. It's not got the accolades that it should, in my opinion. How was it working in the cathedral environment?
It was absolutely brilliant. Like, I get made redundant from Quad. and then kind of hunt around, find a job working at the Open Centre, which is a really, really good kind of community cohesion, charity, social value, all that. Do that for a year, then end up. I see this job as like development officer for Derby Cathedral, and I think, well, I'm a atheist with a bit of a kind of punk leaning, I suppose, and I like to disrupt. And I thought, there's no way a cathedral's going to take me, but I'd quite
exactly what a cathedral needs.
I'd quite like to move back into the cathedral quarter, you know, after leaving Quad. See this job for development officer of the cathedral, and I just fall in love with the place. Like, you know, I love the fact that the then dean and the chapter steward took a chance on me, because, you know, I wasn't a kind of typical cathedral hire. They took a chance on me, and I was really, really grateful for that. And I worked there for about 3 years, and they're incredible places. They really, really are. You know, they are. You know, Derby Cathedral holds the heart of the city and the county, and has done for for at least 600 years, you know, from the Tudor Tower to the Gibbs designed nave. But just the sheer variety of stuff that I ended up doing there, you know, it was bonkers. I remember finishing work one day in the cathedral centre, locking up. It's about 5:30, and there's a little crowd outside the cathedral in College Place, so the alleyway to the left of the cathedral as you look at it. And I thought, what are they doing? And it was a juvenile peregrine that had tried to fledge from the nest, failed miserably, so just kind of parachuted down gently, so he wasn't injured, but, you know, his wings weren't kind of developed enough. And there's like a crowd of like 20 people videoing this like quite vicious little velociraptor. And I thought, okay, I've got to do something here. So, you know, I'm the development officer and then the head of operations, you know, and here I am chasing a peregrine round with a towel while I'm on the phone to Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, and trying to keep the crowds away from this incredibly protected, like, you know, bird. And then we get the peregrine in a box. We take him up to the top of the tower and let him go. He wasn't very happy with us. I went for a pint in the Silk Mill afterwards, because it was quite a long night by that point. I thought I need to kind of decompress it. I went for a pint in the Silk Mill pub, and I remember sitting in the beer garden and just looking at the cathedral tower, and I could hear him, and he was looking at me. I could see him on the edge, on the battlements of the tower, and he was looking at me, going, "I was quite happy down there. What are you doing?" You know?
It took me all day to get down there, and you just lifted me back up.
But it was incredible. What I saw there while I was at the cathedral was just exactly just the sheer complexity of these spaces. Because, you know, when you think about it, a cathedral it's a place of worship. That's what it's for. That's its primary purpose. So people go in there to have a worshipful experience. But then you've got events, and you've got music, and you've got concert attendees. They're not having a worshipful experience. They're having an event experience. Then you've got the heritage audience who are going in, you know, they're just interested in heritage. They're wandering around the space because it's got some incredible sculpture in it. Architecturally, it's incredible. You know, it's got Bess of Hardwick's memorial. So you've got the event audience, you've got the worship or attendees, you've got the congregation, and then you've got the heritage attendee.
And you got the bell ringers like me.
And the bell ringers, you know, but like
I've come and rang the Derby bells.
I love the bells. I love the bells.
Have you had a go?
No, I haven't, because I was always worried that I'd just end up back up there with the tassies, you know.
Oh, they're very good at teaching up there. Go and have a go.
But I have spent time in the ringing chamber and spent some time with the bell ringers, and, you know, it's an incredible space. But how can a space be all three of those things, like an event space, so it's essentially a town hall, a place of worship, and a heritage experience simultaneously. Sometimes you've got all of that audience in the space at exactly the same time, and they expect the other attendee and that other experience to not intrude on their experience.
Yes.
So, you've got kind of, communion at 1:05 p.m. and, that's a very kind of sacred service. But, the cathedral's not closed. So if I went in there because I wanted to look at some sculpture, I can do that while a service is taking place. It's really difficult to compartmentalize it. It's really difficult to go, right, all of these things are happening at the same time, and I'm going to synergize it so that everyone is getting a coherent experience. So tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings an interesting point, actually. So we've got the social aspect, the sort of community engagement aspect, heritage and history aspect. What do you think, in all of your roles, those things are present? What do you think really grabs you? Is there one of those that stands out, or do you really like the mix?
What gets me out of bed in the morning is social value. Is placemaking, civic engagement, social value. Like I want to do stuff, and I want to contribute to something that makes a difference for society. And so it's just really, really important that that motivation is there. That can exist in heritage. It can exist in arts, culture. It can exist in wellbeing provision, support charities, places of worship of any faith, cafes. It can exist in pubs. It's kind of, what gets me out of bed is that ability to do something that helps strengthen the wider environment. So yeah, that's a kind of primary motivator for me, and I think it's really, really important for people to be honest about their motivations. If someone's motivation is, I want to make a huge wad of cash, and I'm going to be brilliant at it. Fair enough, brilliant. That's not my motivation.
Don't go and work for a cathedral.
Yeah, well, don't go and the third sector is a really, really difficult place to work. It is uncertain. There's no sense of, like it is a really, really difficult. It has always been a difficult financial situation anywhere that I've worked. So I remember coming into Quad in 2012, and somebody saying to me, Alex, Quad was built in 2008, and here's the business plan. It's brilliant. The credit crunch hit in 2009, but look, it's 2012. We're almost over it. Like, it's never going to be as bad as what it is at the moment. And I look back at 2012 and go, wow, the sector was flush. Like, we did some amazing things. It's a really, really difficult time. But then if it wasn't a difficult time, then there's no reason for a role like mine to exist. And actually, like, I'd quite like to get to the point where roles like mine, commercially focused roles, within the third sector, should they really exist? Not really. We're here to ensure that all of the assets, and this is the same whether I was at Quad, when I was at the cathedral, now at the museums. The one constant across all of those roles is I've been there to identify the assets that are available to me, and then to monetize those assets. And I'm monetizing those assets to bring a stable income stream in to help safeguard the future of that organization. And should these roles exist? Probably not. They really shouldn't exist.
What would you do if it didn't?
What would I do? So I think I'd probably be a brewer, or a winemaker. So I do make my own wine. I've got a little side hustle of making my own kind of ethically sourced foraged wine.
Awesome.
And I've always had a little kind of dream of kind of getting this side hustle into a kind of sustainable social enterprise. So yeah, I'd probably do that. I probably would become an academic. Right? I'd give in.
Yeah.
I'd give in. You know, I always thought, like, you know, when I finished my PhD, I thought, do you know what? I'm gonna give arts, heritage, and culture a go. I'm gonna see if I can make a career out of it, and I'm gonna give it 10 years. And if I don't, and if I'm a bit useless at it, and you know, it's so unstable that it's just pointless, I'll go and be an academic. It was always my insurance. You know, this is terrible because this is going to go out in the public domain now. And in 10 years, when I decide I want to become an academic, like the University of Derby, they're not going to touch me, are they? They're going to be like, you really want to be here, you know?
Oh, welcome to your last resort. Yeah. So let's talk about, though, turning those things into cash then. There are the obvious ways, like entrance fees into buildings and things like that. But you're a creative guy. Tell us some of the stuff that our listeners and watchers may not think of straight away that you've managed to sort of monetize in a different way.
Okay. When I was at Quad, and look, this I will not take credit for this. This was not my idea. It had existed for 5 or 6 years before I ran it. But we had a series of Quad is a contemporary art gallery, and there's a turnover every 3 or 4 months of artists. And some of the demands that these artists place on Quad's technicians are significant. Because they are contemporary artists. And so, you know, if they want a fully projection mapped environment that's totally immersive, and when you put your hand on a wall, the projections move, like, you know, I still don't know how the technicians did it, but they did it. So you've got all these technicians who've learnt these amazing skills, and they're only being used for 1 month out of every 3. And I thought, you know, there are other organizations in the country who could benefit from those skills, predominantly museums, actually. So I ended up running a department, a kind of commercial department of Quad called Tech Squad. And it was basically a kind of technical consultancy firm where we would, as a collective, go out and we would work with other cultural organizations to build apps, or to do projection mapping, or to do deliver outdoor cinema at their community center or their rugby club, or, you know, whatever it might be. And it was a kind of twofold approach. One was it needs to generate bottom line, because, you know, it needs to support the charity. And then the second one was, you've got this brilliant bunch of technicians. We need to keep them on the books. We need to keep them busy, and we need to keep them in the region. So actually these technicians, by and large, they were freelancers. But I thought, like, look, if I can get some work, I can, I don't know, just put a modest margin on top of it, and I can utilize brand Quad to ensure that the freelance economy in the city, the freelance technical economy in the city, is thriving. And it did work. You know, we were getting, I won't name the cities, but there's a very significant city that had a very significant cultural program that city didn't have the technicians, the freelance technical economy within its local environment. And so on a major project, it farmed the whole lot out to Quad. So Derby's freelance technical economy was benefiting from that. And so the more I can kind of keep these people within this economy, it's the better for the city, the better for the cultural partners, the more income that we can generate. I also did, so we ran outdoor cinema at like 27 venues nationwide. And that was bonkers. That was hairy. It really, really was. Like, you know,
outdoor in the UK is not exactly easy anyway, is it?
No. It was hairy. You know, there were so the concept, like, everyone knows outdoor cinema, right? Giant screen, beautiful heritage property, put 1,000 people in front of it. It's going to be amazing, right? But the execution of it, which is my side of it, was go to a lockup, get a large Luton van, put an incredibly heavy amount of equipment in the back of a Luton van, and it's really complex stuff. Drive 250 miles away from your base in the middle of the countryside with no technical support, and leave 3 technicians in a field to somehow make this work. And it was hairy. It was. I remember.
By the way, you've got 1,000 people turning up at 6 o'clock, and if it's not working, they're going to be 1,000 unhappy people.
Yeah, and there were times when the generator company let us down a couple of times. There were times when a cable failed, and we're in East Sussex, and it's Saturday, and it's 7 o'clock at night, and we're like, where are we going to get one of those from? It was a bit rock and roll, but elements of it worked, elements of it failed miserably, and it's kind of I don't mind failure. Like I think it's really important to be able to learn from your mistakes. But I think I can't get away from talking about this, really, can I? So we also used to do event cinema inside buildings too, and so Quad were the first people to screen The Life of Brian in a cathedral. We screened it in. We took it on tour. We took it to 4 cathedrals nationwide. I couldn't believe 4 cathedrals said yes when I emailed them. And we also screened The Wicker Man and Don't Look Now at Derby Cathedral, which caused an international press furore. I had death threats over this. So I had death threats on Twitter from someone from Midwest Bible Belt. There was a Radio 5 live phone in about those 2 screenings. Is it moral? Is it right?
Yeah.
I looked at this. So like The Wicker Man. Like, spoiler alert: The Wicker Man is a really Christian bloke goes to a pagan island, and like Britt Eklund's like trying to get him to become pagan by just being beautiful, and he refuses to bend his kind of his belief system, and pays the ultimate sacrifice and gets burnt alive by the pagans. But he dies a noble Christian, and it's a Christ parable. It's a different way of exploring the relevance of a space and the space's key narratives. It caused an international press furore. There were protests, death threats. The New York Times covered it. There was a 5 live phone in it. It was bonkers.
I'm sorry, Alex, but it's hilarious. So was your name mentioned when in the New York Times thing?
Yeah. I think
that's a claim to fame.
What was the one of the British newspapers carried a headline that said, "Don't look now, but there's nudity in Derby Cathedral," and it was one of the big nationals. It was hilarious. It was great.
Most cathedrals have nudity with women with their boobs out on their sculptures.
I was going to say, if they never looked at religious art.
Yeah, but it was, it was really good. It was a good way to get people to see the space differently. It was disruptive, but it's not something. What was bizarre was that no one complained about Life of Brian, which is a satire of organised religion.
Yeah, absolutely. That's hilarious.
The big question is, though, that I'm more interested in is, have you been on the Wicker Man at Alton Towers, and how do you feel about it if you have?
Do you know, I don't know, it didn't really feel dangerous enough to me. It's kind of it was fun. It was fun, but give me Smiler any day.
So I asked that question because Matt absolutely hates the Wicker Man.
Oh, really?
I've got the most brilliant photographs.
Yeah, I didn't like that one. But I think because it took me by surprise, because you're not fully strapped in on that one. It's just like a bar across. I was like, oh, this is a gentle one. It's and it's not.
But he's been on it about 3 times now, Alex, and he still hates it. He comes off white. Give him Smiler any day too.
It's Oblivion for me. I really hate Oblivion because you are quite literally throwing yourself off a large building.
Yeah, I don't like that one.
I do it every time. I don't. What does that say? What does that say about me? I don't really.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is, but there is a cognitive bias that's all about that. About you hate it, but you're going to do it anyway, and actually, that's the driver.
See, I find roller coasters really relaxing. I think I'm a bit weird.
I find Smiler relaxing. There's something about Smiler where I'm just like, okay, right, I've definitely stopped thinking about work now. On the 7th loop, work has gone from my brain,
yeah. Oh, that's true, actually, yeah.
But then with Oblivion, I'm just like, oh, think of all these things that I've not done yet. And I'm never going to now,
Well, I digressed, but that whole situation that you went through with that, how did it feel like living on that side of the press?
I don't know. I mean, I never want to do anything just to shock or surprise or disrupt. There needs to be a clear rationale as to why it fits in. This is program that you are offering to the public. So it's another element of who you are as an organization. And so I needed to be clear in my mind that what we were doing, because I'd left the cathedral at that point. I was working for Quad. But I loved the cathedral. So I wanted to make sure that what we were doing added value to the cathedral. And wasn't just there for the shock value. It needed to be a clear narrative around why this is relevant to the cathedral. And I was very, my academic background is in cinema, 20th century British history. And so programming a set of key British films that explore the narrative of God and explore an interactive moment with God. And then having that experience, watching that film in a cathedral completely recontextualizes it and allows you to engage with the building and the core narratives of the building differently. I had that key core rationale there. There was a reason behind it. We didn't put Human Centipede on or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's no reason to do so.
Yeah.
So the attacks, I was fine with because there was a moral and philosophical justification for putting that program there at that point. It was doing something that you couldn't get anywhere else. And it could only be achieved in that building. And it is really important to do that. But also I think sometimes there's a lack of awareness around cathedrals in particular. So, the kind of Kierkegaardian, threshold anxiety stuff of, I don't know what's on the other side of this door, and therefore I'm not really sure how to behave. So therefore that's making me anxious. So why should I go in? Right. But if you put the Wicker Man on in there, you're going to get a load of people going, I know what this is. And I've never been in this space before. And now I can go in on my own terms. And I think that is really, really important. So I think, so long as that moral justification was there and the philosophical justification behind it, I felt like I could justify why we were doing it. And so, why are we doing that? That's disgraceful. It's like, well, we're doing this to demonstrate our relevance to a younger audience and to bring a younger audience in. And what we're hoping, and this was a genuine hope of mine, despite the fact that I'm a kind of, atheist film academic who's working for a cathedral, like a genuine hope of mine was that the people who were coming to see these films would then trickle through to Evensong attendance, because Evensong is one of the most beautiful services that anyone anywhere. It's one of the most beautiful experiences that you can have. And I love going to Evensong. I also quite like sitting at the back for morning prayer as well, 8:30 till 9 o'clock at the cathedral. It's just 20 minutes, 25 minutes of you just getting ready to start the day. And you can go as an atheist, like, you know, you could, I'm probably more of an agnostic now.
I was going to say, do you think you're more spiritual than it's just that there's not a belief in God, or is there no other being, thing, energy out there?
I don't know. I'm a kind of, I respect everybody's belief systems. I don't respect it when other people kind of push those belief systems onto an individual who hasn't asked for more information. So for me, as the study of history is the study of evidence. And that is my mindset. So for me, I wouldn't say I'm a spiritual person, but I absolutely love the mindfulness and the calm and the resetting and the communities that can be offered by worship within worship environments. You know, I think 3 of my favorite places in the city are Derby Cathedral, the Guru Arjan Dev Gurdwara, particularly the Langar kitchen, because the food is incredible, and you know, you get such an amazing welcome. And Jamia Mosque, you know, they're great places to spend time in. You really get all of that: the mindfulness, the reset, the welcome, the community. They're very, very, very important. But these people who were complaining, like, you know, in the 1500s, Derby Cathedral held a beer festival every year. It was called Church Ales. And, you know, it was a fundraiser for what was then All Saints Parish Church. And everyone kind of came together, and you've just got loads of people having a few beers inside the cathedral. You know, people have been enjoying themselves in that space for over 500 years, and it is important that they continue to do so. And so, you know, these people going, this space should only be used for worship. It just showed a kind of lack of awareness on their part of the history and heritage of that space and what it has been used for and what it was built to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I just glanced down to see some questions, and the next one that caught my eye was, what's the secret to getting new audiences into heritage spaces? And I think we've just had an absolute masterclass in it. But
I think it's about, I don't know. I think it's about meeting people on their own terms. You know, it's kind of, do not gatekeep. Be aware that threshold anxiety is a thing that exists. You know, like, you know, if you've not gone to the right school, then like I went to a Church of England secondary school. I'd never been to Evensong before I started working for the cathedral. And I wasn't going to go and do it a couple of years before I started working for the cathedral because I didn't know what was on the other side of those doors. But now I do, and I was met on my own terms as an employee. You know, I know what's there. Meet people on their own terms. Don't gatekeep. Don't patronize. Be brave enough to allow your organization to be seen in a different light. You know, a good example, like the Derby Heritage Beer Festival that we held at the Museum of Making last year, I think was a really good example of that. You know, 3,500 people over 4 days. And we brought a beer festival back to the city that just hadn't existed for 5 years. And, you know, the demand was there. It was really positively received. But I watched people 2 pints in, 3 pints in, maybe sometimes more, wandering around the ground floor of the Museum of Making and looking at some of the works that we've got on the walls and kind of going, oh, I remember that train engine. I remember this. I remember that painting. That used to be in the Acropolis, in the marketplace. Oh, it's amazing the museum have got it. I watched people having heritage experiences over a pint because you can. And so, you know, if you meet people on their own terms, they're going to feel welcomed. They're going to feel engaged in the work that whatever organization it is does, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I've just literally realized that I'm quite into heritage. I particularly like engineering heritage and things. So I love the Museum of Making. But the first time I ever went wasn't as a museum visitor. It was for another thing.
Well, we went for our brand photo shoot.
We did. And I remember being in there and going, oh, I didn't really know this place existed. How cool is this? Like, I'm gonna come back as a punter, and so to bring people in for those other experiences is really important.
Awesome photo that goes on all our website, and most of our big stuff is in the Museum of Making of the big Rolls-Royce engine, and it is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing, like, this is what's so clever about the Museum of Making. And look, I started there in 2022, so it had been live for a year and a bit. I wasn't involved in the curation of it. I'm not the builder. I'm the operator. I'm the person who now it's here, and we've just got to kind of get people in. We've got to make sure that it's well used. And it's kind of like the Museum of Making meets people on their own terms. You can come in through a glass door. You can see straight the way through the building. So, you know what to expect on the other side. And the first thing that you're greeted with is a cafe. And the cafe is priced reasonably. I try my best to ensure that those prices are accessible, reasonably priced, locally sourced, and relaxed. And you are met by someone at the door. But then as you walk around the space, you see things that, if you've spent any amount of time in Derby, they will resonate personally. So, my father-in-law works for Toyota. And as I walk in, I see a giant exploded Toyota Corolla above my head. And I think of the process that, he supervises now as a team leader at Toyota. I see the Rolls-Royce engine, and then I think about the mystery and magic of like Sinfin and what the hell is behind those giant blast doors, and as you walk around, I remember we've got on the assemblage there's a rack in the assemblage that has got about 80 Qualcast lawn mowers on it. And every time I walk past the assemblage, somebody is standing next to the rack of 80 lawnmowers going, I used to have one of those, or I worked at Qualcast, and or my father did. And they're having these kind of personal experiences. It's not patronizing. It just presents the people's collection back to them and goes, this is yours. And I find that humbling, and I find it a really powerful experience.
I think Derby Museums it's something that I've discovered in the last couple of years, because my daughter really likes history and museums. So we've been to the Derby Museum and looked at the Egyptian collection. That's awesome. And I think that they do connect you with the city. And there are lots of these places in all the cities across the country. But I think we just if they're on our doorstep, we don't think to go in. And if we're a visitor, we don't necessarily think about it either. And Derby was voted like the worst place in the world to visit ever for a weekend away. But actually, just from this conversation, there are lots of amazing spaces in Derby that you can go and visit.
My stock response to that, so that witch article has haunted me. And, so Derby was ranked, I don't know, I think it was like 25th out of 25 cities. Like, there's loads more cities in the country. It didn't survey the whole amount. One of the ones it didn't survey, and I'm sorry if anyone is listening from back home, one of the cities it didn't survey is Wolverhampton. And it's just, I feel like, and again, I'm going to ruin any career opportunities I've got in Wolverhampton. But anybody who thinks Derby is a bad city to spend time in, go and spend some time in Wolverhampton. And I'm a West Brom fan, so I'm going to say that. But Wolverhampton is just, I look at Derby and I go, right, for a city this size, it's got 3 incredible museums. It's got the greatest real ale scene I've ever seen anywhere. When I left Dudley, I was like, right, I can't wait to leave Dudley. But God, I'm really going to miss the Black Country Living Museum, Dudley Zoo, and the pubs. And the pubs are not going to be as good in Derby. They're better. How is that? It's incredible. There is so much to do. You walk around the back of the Museum of Making, and You walk around the back, and then you walk for 15 minutes, and you're in what appears to be a Peak District village in Darley Abbey. And you're like, how is this possible? It's unbelievable. There's no green space in Dudley. Like, this is like, I'm in heaven here. It's fantastic. I love this city.
It's really hilarious that you mentioned Wolverhampton, because I was there only last week. Me and my friend went there to see a show, and it was a very specific show that I had done some advising on. And we went to the Wolverhampton art gallery, and there's an amazing collection there. Like, it's absolutely fantastic. But it was like, we literally went, there is nothing to do in Wolverhampton. We'll just go and find somewhere to sit for the afternoon and do that. And I think you can find something in any city. People are always telling us how terrible Coventry is. We really enjoy the cathedral area of Coventry. It's it's a beautiful cathedral. So I think you can just find something anywhere if people like yourself are creating invitations.
Yeah, and again, like, when I did my masters, I went to Warwick for my masters, and I had a choice between living in Leamington or Coventry, and I was like, right, no chance am I living in Coventry. I'll move to Leamington. Leamington is so dull. Like, it's just so dull. Like, everything is painted white because the whole town is a blank canvas. Like, there's nothing. They've forgotten to fill it in. Nothing happens in Leamington.
So you're not applying for jobs in Wolverhampton, Leamington.
Coventry is like, so I avoided it like the plague when I was doing my masters. And then Quad were doing some work in Coventry. So I stayed in a Premier Inn overnight. And I'm like wandering around the city, and I'm like, this is unreal. This city is amazing. The Herbert and the cathedral, like the power of that cathedral.
Yeah.
The old cathedral as a monument, but then the new cathedral to kind of just, if anyone wants to kind of experience the incredible power of contemporary art, like, just go to Coventry Cathedral, because it is filled with all of the very best contemporary artists from the 1960s. And it is just so, it's an amazing, amazing space. We screened The Life of Brian in Coventry Cathedral. And that was good fun.
Amazing.
Hi, so we just wanted to stop the podcast for just a few seconds to introduce you to our HQ community. It's for bold solopreneurs and small business owners who are tired of doing things on their own, because let's face it, success is a team sport.
We've got a great community already together of brilliant people. They are kind, they are interesting, they are knowledgeable, and they are already supporting each other. What we've seen in the group in just the last few weeks has been really incredible. So if you want to join us, it is the place to be.
Find out more and join now. www.qbranch.consulting/HQ. Remember, success is a team sport. Now back to the podcast.
So I reckon there's probably going to be quite a few leaders of cultural organizations, even down to small sort of social groups and things, who may well be struggling at this time. And there's a bit of a two-part question. To anyone in that position, what would you advise them to start doing straight away? And more importantly, what would you advise them to stop doing?
That is a really difficult question, because it is entirely dependent on the individual circumstances of that organization, and what the role of that organization is. So, I mean, in general, be open, be honest, be transparent, lead with authenticity. I remember when I started my career, I was like, God, I've got a Dudley accent. Like, who's gonna and then I've dropped the phone voice now. Like, it's what you see is what you get. And like, I think to lead with authenticity is really, really important, because that will come out in the work that you do. Don't use big words when a little one will do. You know? But and this sounds really kind of minor, I suppose. But the thing is, like, I see this on artist statements. I see this on exhibition marketing materials for various different organizations, you know, where someone will talk about, you know, the interdisciplinary approach and general nature of being that is reflected in this work. And I'm like, right, just talk plain English, tell people why they should come in. And, you know, if it's come and look at this stuff because it's fun, like, tell them that, like, you know, just communicate really clearly and really, really openly. And what should people stop doing? Gatekeeping, you know, just keeping hold of that kind of cultural capital and not letting it go. Judging as well. You know, there are huge economic disparities within our city. And, you know, when you've got people coming in, I learned this from the cathedral as well. You know, you'd see certain people sitting on one of the pews in the cathedral and you just go, good on you. Like, you know, you are welcome. And more often than not, if I was popping over, I'd sit down and have a natter with them over a cup of tea. And you learn so much. You learn so much about the city. You learn so much about the mindset. So, you know, your next experience with a person, they might not look like the audience you want, but, like, who cares? Like, actually, that could be your next major donor. That could be someone who, you know, is a 14-year-old tearaway, like I suppose I was a little bit. But like, then you've gone into that space and you're like, your life's transformed. And then 30 years down the line, you're leaving a huge legacy to that organization. So treat everybody on respectful terms. Yeah. Who am I to say stop? Who am I to tell organizations to stop doing stuff?
Well, I think sometimes people do need that guidance. So one of the things I do want to touch on is what your biggest challenges have been, and was it the flooding?
Yeah, that was bad. Yeah, biggest challenges kind of just within my career. Yeah, that would be one of two things. It would be COVID. I was the head of technical and commercial services at Quad during COVID. And so I'm part of the senior management team. And good old Boris has told everyone to not go to the theatre and not go shopping. And, you know, whatever you do, don't go to the cinema. But he didn't close cinemas. So we're there going, we opened at 11 o'clock. And then we shut at 11:30 because we were like, what are we doing? You know, but then, you know, that initial 2-week period just before furlough was announced of going, I've got 40 or 50 people here and I need to keep them busy and find them jobs to do. Otherwise they might not have a job. And not knowing that there was that kind of, you know, safety net of furlough because it just didn't exist yet. You know, that kind of 2-week period, that was really tough. The flooding, so Storm Babbitt was, a harrowing experience, I suppose. So
explain to the listeners who aren't from Derby what happened.
So Storm Babbitt hit in October 2023, and the Museum of Making, which is built on the site of what's widely regarded to be the world's first factory, is right next to the River Derwent. And the reason why it's there is the river was diverted to power a water wheel, which then powered all of the silk looms. So when Storm Babbitt hit in October, we experienced a river level of 3.54 meters on the River Derwent. Today, I think the river level is about 1.1 meters. So, you know, we're talking about 2.5 meters higher. It's the highest level since records began. Records began in the 1930s, I think. It was just a really, really difficult experience. The Museum of Making was completely flooded. And we were relying on Environment Agency data. So Environment Agency data said that the peak was going to be 2.9 meters, and it was going to hit on 5 o'clock on the Saturday, 5 p.m. The peak was 3.5 meters, and it hit at 5 a.m. So we were halfway through our prep, and then I wake up at 7 o'clock the next day to get a text from our head of facilities with a picture of the river. Like, it's not even a lagoon, the river is flowing through the building. So I get on my bike, come down here, and I can't get within 80 or 90 yards of the Museum of Making. It's completely covered. So that was a really, really difficult one. We then had to get the space cleaned. We then had to, reallocate members of staff, try and move events for clients who booked events here. Which
weddings and all sorts of stuff, weren't there?
Yeah, we did. We moved all of that successfully. And I remember BBC Radio Derby interviewed me right next to the lagoon. Well, it wasn't a lagoon, it was right next to the river. And they were like, well, when do you think you'll be open again? And I was like, look, I don't know. Get in, and the river.
What do you think?
Yeah. I remember kind of saying, like, I really don't. 9 months maybe. But we all clubbed together. We worked very, very hard, and we got the Museum of Making back open in 3 months. And one of my proudest moments of my career was the Derby Telegraph front page, where it said, Museum of Making reopening regarded a miracle, and it was like, it wasn't a miracle. It was really hard work.
Yeah. It's all that time you spent in the cathedral, Alex.
But it was really, really difficult. It was, we learned a lot. We learned a lot about the building. We learned a lot about how to look after it. And we learned a lot about the sheer force of nature as well. Highest river level since records began, global warming hitting, well over 1.5 degrees. At this moment, it's kind of all coalescing into this thing, and the thing is a giant surge of water that comes and hits the museum. But we have I was talking about social value earlier. We have a civic responsibility to open our doors. It's really important that the Museum of Making exists, not just for us to generate income, which then goes back into the charity, but also to bring that footfall into the city, so that the secondary spend can be shared around the city, because we're a key cultural destination within the city, and it is really, really important that cultural destinations open and operate successfully so that the wider economy can benefit. So we were just like, right, let's get open as soon as possible, because it's going to have a huge economic impact on the city if we're not.
How do you lead through those times, and how do you get people on board for that?
Mm-hmm. It was interesting because the Museum of Making was entirely co-produced, and so my predecessors, they gathered the collection in a mothballed museum, then got a load of people in and went, hey, would you display this? What would you display? What's the story that you want to tell with these objects? So again, not kind of not gatekeeping in any way, and as a result, the thousands of people who helped to shape the Museum of Making, including the staff, everyone was bought in. So, including the wider stakeholders, people who played their part in Remake the Museum project back in 2015, 2016, saw the museum underwater and went, there's a bit of me in there. So the buy-in for support around Storm Babbitt and the flooding was created not by me, but by my predecessors 10 years ago, who shaped a project that just had a little bit of everyone in it. and we invited people to kind of go, right, handle the collections, showcase this, play with that. So that's really important. That's not really leading, that's facilitating. And I think it's more, I think you have to kind of create the environment where leadership isn't some top-down authoritarian thing, but it's a facilitation. And for me, the best way to do that is to ensure that your recruitment process is correct, and they've all got those values. Everyone you're getting in cares and is passionate about social value, about placemaking, about heritage. But also, when you get a day one opportunity, like the Museum of Making, where it's just like, right, here's an empty building, fill it. If you've got a day one opportunity, like, let everyone in. Don't patronize them, just let them all in and see what comes out of it. Because 10 years down the line, as we found out, that will work to your benefit, because there'll be a huge public outpouring of sympathy when something really bad happens.
Yeah, there's the word culture is bounded around a lot these days, but what you're talking about there is literal culture in action from the ground roots up.
Absolutely.
From day one, they created a culture where everyone was, part of the story.
I also think when we're talking about how other people can get people into their organizations, you have to get people to understand why they should care about it. And I think that's what you guys do really well. Yeah.
And, it's the same, like Severn Trent Water, I wasn't the right fit. I didn't care. They should never have recruited me. And they should have spotted that at the recruitment process. It's really, really important to spend some time in an organization where there's an alignment of values, and I'm always on the culture question. The definition, culture is an agricultural term. Like Raymond Williams writes about this, and he says, culture means to cultivate. It's a process of tending and growing. So that kind of cultivating has to start with some soil and some water and some seeds. You can't just kind of chuck people a completed sunflower and kind of go, right, care about that.
Yes, absolutely. That's a brilliant analogy. I love that one. So you've done brilliantly, and it's been a key part of what you've done is balancing technology, particularly in terms of audio visual, digital experience, with heritage, history, community. Where are we going with this in the future, in your eyes, and how do we? Because you've done brilliantly at managing the balance between the two.
It's a really good question. It's I'm worried about the future of tech, and just generally, in the fact that we appear to be going full Skynet, Terminator 2, but in terms of a visitor experience, it has the potential to be one giant gimmick. And the more I see tech within visitor environments, the more gimmicky it becomes. It needs to add a layer of value on top of something. It can't just be, because otherwise it's just look how clever I am. It can't. If there's no need to use tech, don't use it. Use a piece of paper and a pen. Don't use it just because you've got the budget to use it, because actually it's yet another piece of threshold anxiety inducing kit. There are people who don't really know how to use tech properly, who will then be really turned off by that visitor experience, and they'll be like, there's just too many screens here. I want to look at objects. I want to look at this. I want to look at that. The flip side of that is, you know, when I look at the future of museums and cathedrals and places of heritage, I see less books on walls and more immersive object-led experiences. So like the assemblage at the Museum of Making, which is a completely open museum store of like 30,000 objects. Nothing is interpreted. There is no signage anywhere. And it's just grouped by material, because that's what the co-production process kind of deemed it appropriate. So you can walk through there and you can go, that is a Qualcast lawnmower, because it's a lawnmower with Qualcast written on it. But if you want to find out more, you can then go to the Trailmaker app that will give you loads of information and point you in the direction of a few other objects in the assemblage that it thinks you might be interested in. And you can kind of you can make a trail. It's, you know, that's adding value to the visitor experience. It's not intrusive, because you can reject it and still have the experience that you want. Not everybody should be forced into tech. Tech is a platform. It's a media to reach people, a form of media. It's not the be all and end all. And so, you know, if you can deliver what it is that you want to deliver with a pen and paper or a conversation, then do that instead. Because the problem is with tech is it costs a hell of a lot of money, and then you've got to maintain it afterwards as well.
Yeah.
If you had unlimited resources, talking about maintaining things, absolutely all the money in the world, what is the most crazy, ambitious thing you'd love to do?
God, I don't know. And I think the reason why I don't know is I've never had that experience, you know, like working in this sector for 13 years in this city. It's never been that. So, like, you know, I've almost kind of become blinkered. And ultimately, I'm not a creative. That's what I'd do. If I had unlimited resources, I'd give it to someone creative. Because my role is to operate and to operate successfully and to facilitate brilliant thinkers, brilliant curators, you know, brilliant artists to go and do the work that they need to do. So if I had unlimited resources, I would go up to a person who I rate incredibly highly, and they'd probably be one of the museum team because they are superb. And I would go, there you go. Can I work for you? I'll be, you know, and I will kind of facilitate their vision. It sounds like I have like no ambition. This would be an interesting question to kind of sort of analyze, really.
Yeah, I actually think it sounds the opposite of that. I think,
answer.
Yeah,
because the creatives really, really need you, which is why you're in that job. Because generally, creatives are terrible at organising stuff and facilitating stuff because they're so busy having the ideas
and business generally.
Yeah,
we work with a lot of creatives. We are creatives too, and it is having that balance. So I think that's a great answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think there's a question that we haven't asked you that would get out some information that you'd like our audience to know or hear?
Ooh, let me think. Now, there was the question around what was it? The book that inspired you and the piece of music.
Oh, well, you're getting that one.
Yeah, I'm getting that one. Don't worry.
So I was looking forward to answering that because, like, I probably shouldn't say my response. Okay, question that I haven't been asked that I think would be
I want
useful.
the listeners to know that we haven't asked you.
I don't know. I mean, I think I do think that the one thing that I think has really benefited me is the fact that, like, you know, I was a waiter in a terrible restaurant for 2 years. And then I was a car park attendant and a face painter and a birthday party host and a front of house kind of ticket tearer at Dudley Zoo. And now I have authority and responsibility for the people who fulfill those roles in my organisation, because that allows me, because I know, because I've done it. And so, like, you can kind of, I think it's just really important for people to go ahead and, like, for people to experience, like, the front line of whatever it is that they're in. Like, go and work in a bar, like, you know, go and volunteer in a food bank, you know. Like, people need to, I think, really, really understand people, motivation, and some of the work that it takes to do those kinds of roles. Yeah, that was just a bit that I hadn't said that I thought might be useful.
Yeah, I think that's really good to hear. And I was actually going to say, one of the things that really struck me in your opening story that I wanted to really sort of hammer home to our audience is, if you look at the people we interview on this podcast, all of our guests, I would say, without exception, didn't have what you would call the cookie cutter start.
Mm-hmm.
Like, quite often they didn't get on well at school, or the path wasn't a straight line for any of the people who we've brought you, who have done incredible things with their lives. So if you are just starting out, maybe you are just sort of finishing school, or you're just heading to A-levels, or thinking about university, or can't get into university,
or you've got a job that you really hate.
Yeah. It's not, the standard path isn't the only path, is what I think I'm saying. Look at the guests we've had, and, you know,
you can do something different.
You're an amazing example of that, Alex, I think.
Well, I read a couple of days ago, like Ricky Gervais got made redundant at like 34 and then decided to give comedy a go. Like,
Jimmy Carr was the same. Jimmy Carr just sort of, well, he was in a pretty good job that he absolutely hated and just went, right, yeah, I've got 3 months to make this work.
Yeah.
There's so many people out there who just were fishing around in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and then went, right, let's go and try this thing then. And
yeah, I mean, I do think part of that is about having a kind of, I don't know, like, some of those people are fortunate to be able to kind of go, right, I'm going to stop and then I'm going to do this, because, you know, they've got kind of, like, most people aren't in a position to do that. But then someone like, you know, if you're made redundant, you can't find yourself another job, and you're giving something a go. Of necessity, you're being forced to try something, aren't you? So, you know, I think people who are in that privileged position to try stuff, fine. But for everyone else, there's day 6 and 7, isn't there? You know, and that's really tough, and that's really hard, because, you know, like, day 6 and 7 for me are definitely about resetting.
And doing wine.
And making my wine and tending my allotment. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Don't forget the wine. Right. So, Matt's favourite part of the show.
My favourite part of the show, and by the sound of it, it might be yours too. I get to do my Desert Island Discs bit now, which I love. So, Alex, can you give us a book, a piece of music, and a tool or framework that have really inspired and changed your journey that you'd like to share with others?
Okay, so book, like, I don't read, I don't do management manuals. I don't do, like, you know, how to kind of, and I feel really bad, you know, given company, like, I just don't read that stuff.
You
like,
really don't have to.
Yeah.
I don't read, like, all these kind of strategy guidance documents. My book is the Hornblower Saga by C.S. Forrester. Mm-hmm. That is a management manual. So, you know, the first 3 Hornblower novels, everyone knows Hornblower as this kind of, like, you know, early 2000s drama, bodice ripping drama, with a hunky guy, seafaring. But actually, C.S. Forester's books, particularly, the first three, The Happy Return, Ship of the Line, Flying Colours, are about a man in a heavily masculine environment, completely unsure of himself, undereducated, possibly a little naturally talented, and then just kind of going and just insecure, and just kind of going well, now I'm in a position of leadership. What the hell do I do next? And it's really interesting to see, across, the books are quite short. They're about 160, 170 pages long. And it's really interesting to kind of explore vulnerable masculinity in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars on a ship. It's great. It's a management manual.
I love that answer. That's brilliant.
Yes. And as ever, there'll be a link to that title in the show notes.
Fantastic. Good grief. Yes, everyone, read Hornblower. I love this. That's great. And then
music.
Piece of music. I would go, and I'm quite often found in the office listening to this. I would go with the whole of London Calling by The Clash. I've got a first press on vinyl. It's one of my treasured possessions. It's beautiful. It is a beautiful album that tells you to not do what everyone else tells you to do. It tells you to kind of cross cultural divides and kind of generate new experiences, and question authority. Authority isn't made; it's earned. And that's the kind of one thing I learned from punk, I think, is that you kind of, just because somebody is in charge doesn't mean that they have earned that respect. Everyone who I've been fortunate enough to work with in Derby, kind of over the past 13, 14 years, they've been my bosses and they've earned my respect because they're fantastic leaders. But don't accept everything that you're told, and kind of analyze it. Then what was the other one? Oh, framework. So my framework. So I had one of my previous managers decided that it would be helpful if I had a mentor. And this was about 6 or 7 years ago. It'd be helpful if I had a mentor. I think it might kind of help tame some of my kind of out the box things, And so I did have a mentor, and I had a mentor for 3 days, 3 weeks. He met me 3 times for 90 minutes a time, and then just stopped replying to my emails. So I thought, okay, maybe being mentored is not for me. I would still really like a mentor.
Shocking.
If anyone's listening and they think they can add some value, I'd gratefully appreciate it, because no one's the finished article. But the one thing that my mentor did tell me, and I still use it, Eisenhower matrix. I love an Eisenhower matrix. Mm-hmm. My brain does not work in a linear way. So if you give me a to-do list, and in fact, I don't think anyone's does. If you give me a to-do list, I'm just going to put the next thing last on the list. I'm going to do the thing at the top of the list. But the thing at the top of the list might not be the most important thing. You're putting it in chronological order. So an Eisenhower matrix that has got kind of urgent, important, and then if it's urgent and important, you should be doing that. And then if it's not urgent and it's not important, stop doing it. And I actually write it in. I've created an Excel spreadsheet template. So I've got about, I don't know, 32 cells in the urgent and important area. And it's done in a kind of matrix setup. And so if it's in the absolute top corner, drop everything and do it right now. But, if it's important, but it's not urgent, you can schedule it. If it's, you can there's the delegate this section as well, which is, I think, not urgent but quite important, or not important but quite urgent. I just find it a really useful way of so the first thing I do when I get into the office is I pour a cup of coffee and I open up my Eisenhower matrix. I keep it for every week. So it's an Excel spreadsheet. I then kind of, if it's in progress, I highlight the cell in yellow. I might then add a comment and kind of say, I'm doing this, or I'm just waiting on an email from this person. And then if I've completed it, I do a strike through on the cell. And then I've got like 3 years worth of these. So if I want to find out what work I was doing in February last year, I can look at February 2024's Eisenhower matrices. I do a new one every week, and it allows me to keep track of what I've achieved that week, and what the sticky stuff is, because it's like, if it's been on there for 6 months, it's fairly problematic, you know.
Yeah.
It's interesting actually, because in our HQ business community, just last week they mentioned the Eisenhower.
They were talking about Eisenhower amongst themselves. Yeah.
It's an incredible, you know, I think you'll probably know better than me, but I think it's called the Eisenhower matrix because Eisenhower essentially ran the whole of the USA using an Eisenhower matrix of kind of going, right, I'm just going to do the important stuff. I'm going to tell other people to do the slightly less important stuff. I'm going to make sure I've got time to do that over there. And I'm going to stop doing all this down here. Like, you know, I love it. Absolutely love it. It was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
It really was.
Awesome.
Yeah. I love that.
It's been great having you on, Alex. Thanks for thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your time and experience and valuable knowledge with us. It's been brilliant.
And we had you on our radar to ask, and then I happened to bump into you at Radio Derby. We were both going on to have a chat, weren't we?
Yeah. Look, I really think this podcast is, you know, it's quite it's a really important resource and a really important tool. Like, we should be. I'm in a leadership position in arts, culture, and heritage, and I don't know whether I ever thought I'd get there. And there are other people out there who can do it as well. Yeah. And if I'm not sharing, if cultural leaders aren't sharing, then we're not inspiring those future generations. But your podcast is really, really important, because the people that you're interviewing are having open conversations and they're sharing, and hopefully, you know, your work inspires those future generations. So it's really important. So I had to come on, you know, because it's like, you know, this is really, you know, I just hope I'm half as good as Michael Gladwell.
I don't know if any of us are half as good as Michael Gladwell.
No one's read as many strategy books as Michael Gladwell. That's why I don't read them. I just email Michael and go, tell me the strategy for this. And he goes, please see page 181 of this.
Yeah, he's an awesome human being, but so are you. And thank you for keeping our heritage buildings alive, because they're so important.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's a team effort. It's never just one person.
Oh, Jenny, your life's just one big drama. This was what my auntie said to me, and it inspired me to put all my dramas in one book. So if your life is full of drama, and I believe everyone's life is full of drama, this is the book with real stories, real struggles, real tools to navigate real life.